I want to just show you a few highlights on how this kind of quality assurance systems work across countries. And I should contrast here the OECD average, Italy, Singapore, and Italy. When it comes to this shared notion of what good mathematics is, only about half of the schools in Italy say, well, we operate within this framework. And it's very interesting because Italy is a highly centralized country, has a national curriculum, national standards. You go to the schools and they tell you, for us, we don't know. We don't operate in this framework. When you go to Singapore, every school operates within this shared notion. And it's true in many high-performing education systems. Who do we talk to when we want to improve results? In Italy, only about 30% of the schools regularly talk to people outside the school, experts who can help them to advance. In the case of Singapore, 2/3 of the countries. And there are some countries where it's almost 100%. This kind of outside consultation is very, very important. Mentoring, very important ingredient of quality assurance, helping incoming teachers to become better teachers, and so on. Evaluation. You can see in the case of Italy, external evaluation is still quite rare. The most high-performing education system, it happens naturally, every day, every year, in a constructive way. Not in terms of just accountability, but in terms of helping schools to become better. Internal evaluations, more common now in Italy. A lot has happened in this, but still not universal. Use of evidence, use of data. Very important ingredient of high-performing education system. Knowing the truth, telling people the truth, telling students the truth of what they can do, telling teachers the truth. School, very, very important. You need really good evidence and data for this. It's not so common in Italy. 100% of the schools do this. Student voice, very interesting. When we talk about quality assurance in many education systems, we talk about everyone except those who matter most, the students. What we see in many high-performing education systems that the student voice is a very important part of that equation. They listen very carefully to what students do. Now, teacher organizations often hate that. And there's some really good examples. If you go to Norway, for example, teacher organizations have worked with student organizations to do it well. At the beginning, they said, oh, we don't like students because they just complain, they don't have any solutions, it's really just very negative. And then they woke up and said, well, why don't we actually work with them? And they agreed on a framework of how students can actually contribute to the evaluation of the education system in a positive way. And they succeeded with this.
To do that.
Sorry. And I wanted to just share with you one example here. When you look at Singapore, what is very, very important there is the regular sharing of experience of practice. This is not happening, sort of in an artificial environment or irregularly or when someone else from the outside comes in, but every day. Very, very important to build this culture of collaboration within the schools. And that is not something that happens by itself because teachers like each other and work with each other. You really need to have a very strong organizational framework behind it to make it happen in every school very systematically, day by day. But there are many, many good examples of how this is happening today. On one more aspect, and that is the capacity of education systems to invest resources where they matter most. Not spend the same everywhere, not sort of have a very rigid kind of framework, but have a good sense of where resources can make most of a difference. What high-performing systems do is they invest the resources where the challenges are greatest. They attract the most talented teachers into the most challenging classrooms. And they get the best principals into the toughest schools. And they also make intelligent spending choices. Again, they prioritize teachers over class size. Very important. I show you just one piece of data on this because I think it's really important. On the horizontal axis, I measure the equity in educational spending. 0 is about you give every school the same. If you're to the left side, you give the richer schools more money. If you're on the right side, you invest resources where students need the most. And on the vertical axis, you have the performance. And here you have the countries. If you're in Finland, very much to the right, Finland invests a lot of resources for the students who need the most. And if you look in the case of Italy, it's not so far from the zero line, but on the wrong side. No? There's a tendency in Italy, like in most other countries, that if you come from wealthy families, you also get the better teacher, you also get the smaller class, you get the more privileged neighborhood, and so on. And that's actually an ineffective use of resources, because if you come from a privileged background, you know, it actually doesn't matter whether you go to school in Italy or in Japan or in Brazil or in Finland. Students from privileged families perform relatively similarly across countries. If you come from a very disadvantaged family, school actually matters a lot. And that's why many high-performing systems invest their resources where they can make most of the difference. The country or the system that does that best, according to our measures, is actually the country of China. This is this very special culture. We can't really compare. We can't sort of learn from it in a way. But you know, when you look at this, what actually China has done is very simple. They have created devices that attract great talent into difficult schools. If you're a vice principal in a high-performing school in China, no? And you say to yourself, I really want to become a principal. The education system doesn't say, well, wait until you become so and so many years, or they tell you, yes, you can do that. But first, help us to turn around one of the most disadvantaged schools. If you want to advance in your teacher career, there's a lot of career structures. You advance by helping other teachers to become better teachers. That is the only criterion to succeed. And actually, I've tested that personally. When I've been in Shanghai, I've been there many times, I always ask the officials, the minister, the vice minister, all of the senior people, what about your own educational career? And so far, every of them has told me, you know, during my initial years of teaching, I went for 3, 4, 5 years to teach in a rural school or in a disadvantaged school. Basically, they use the best resources in the most difficult circumstances. This is not rocket science. This is what every education system can do. They did that quite recently, in fact, in the case of Shanghai. And between 2003 and 2012, which is where we have data for, they were able to reduce the variability in school performance by around half. Very important part of the success. Last point I want to make is about coherence, and that is obvious. But one of the things that we do see is that high-performing systems do things in similar ways across long periods over time. Teachers know that what they are told today is going to be still valid tomorrow and the day after. There's also a great deal of coherence and consistency across all aspects of the education system. What the mathematics teacher and the history teacher and the geography teacher do makes sense together. There's a coherence between early childhood education, school, and higher education. There is consistency in implementation. What actually is in the books, in the laws, actually happens in the classroom. And there's a high degree of fidelity. Teachers, school principals really, really try hard to actually make those things happen every day. Many people in Europe think, you know,